She looked me straight in the eye and said, "You're useless." That single word cut deeper than any blade. It wasn't just an insult, it was a verdict, a dismissal of everything I had built, sacrificed, and given. In that moment, the bond I thought could never be broken cracked wide open, and I realized betrayal doesn't always come from enemies. It comes from those you once trusted with your whole heart. Before we dive into today's story, I recommend you hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell, so you never miss a new story filled with drama, resilience, and unexpected twists. If you enjoy this video, type 1 in the comments. If not, type 0 to let me know how I can make better content for you. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and maybe grab your favorite drink, because this is a tale you won't want to miss. Let's get started. I have lived in Portland, Maine, nearly my entire life. At 68, I know the rhythm of this harbor city as well as I once knew the measurements of the bridges I helped design. The gulls cry at dawn, the tide rises and falls with a patient steadiness, and the wind carries both salt and sawdust into the lungs of anyone who lingers near the piers. My home sits at the edge of this coastal town, a Victorian house with pale blue shingles and a turret that my late wife, Grace, loved to decorate each Christmas with white lights. I kept it exactly as she liked it. Some men sell their houses when their wives die, but I could never imagine leaving the place we made into a home. I was a structural engineer by trade, a man whose hands once measured the weight of steel beams and the stress of aging planks. Retirement was never a choice. It came when Grace's illness pulled me from work. After she passed, I found I could not go back to the precision of bridge reports and municipal contracts. I turned instead to repairing wooden boats in a small workshop by the harbor, teaching a few students from the community college how to calculate loads and choose the right timber. They said I was patient. I told them patience was nothing but stubbornness with a schedule. The house is filled with reminders of Grace. A faint trace of her perfume still clings to the curtains she stitched by hand. Her leather-bound photo albums rest on the parlor shelves, the spines worn from years of thumbing through the holidays, graduations, and ordinary afternoons. The bay window in the front room catches the morning light just the way she wanted. I remember sanding its frame until my knuckles split because she had seen something similar in a magazine and whispered, "Wouldn't it be lovely to?" read there with a cup of tea. When I sit there now, the light falls across the empty chair, and I feel both comforted and crushed. I keep my routines tight because they hold me steady. Every morning I walk to Harbor Roasters for black coffee. The barista knows my order, but still asks, maybe to give me the dignity of choosing. I write small notes to myself on yellow slips. Check gutters, sharpen plane blades. Call Connolly. Connolly is my neighbor, a retired postal worker who shuffles over for tea once a week. He reminds me to oil the porch railing and jokes that I maintain my house better than the city maintains its roads. His company breaks the silence, though when he leaves, the silence seems to double. My daughter Amanda lives 2 hours south in Boston. She is 34, smart, ambitious, and always on her phone. We used to speak more often when Grace was alive. Now our conversations are brief check-ins about bills or weather. Amanda married Travis Banks, a man who introduces himself as a fintech advisor. I have never quite understood what he advises, since his jobs come and go like tides. They visit me when convenient, and though I welcome them with meals and stories, I can sense the distance. Sometimes Amanda looks at my trembling hand, as if she were already measuring my decline. 8 years ago, when Grace's health first turned, we visited an attorney and wrote our wills. I left the house and my modest stock portfolio to Amanda on one condition, that she finish graduate school. At the time, I believed it would anchor her future and honor the sacrifices Grace and I made. She never finished. Still, I left the papers as they were, perhaps because I feared changing them would feel like betraying Grace's wish for stability. Now, in the quiet of evenings, I sometimes wonder whether I am still of use. The body stiffens, the fingers tremble, and though my mind remains sharp, I notice how the world assumes otherwise. Younger men in the hardware store offer to carry lumber I can still lift. Clerks talk louder as if my hearing had gone. Alone in the house, I hear my own doubts echo. The word useless has not yet been spoken aloud, but it hovers like a shadow waiting to be named. Still, I cling to the sense of being necessary, at least to myself. When I plane the hull of a fishing boat and the wood curls into clean ribbons, I feel the same satisfaction I once did, checking the stress calculations on a bridge. When I hand a student a slide rule and watch him fumble, I feel like a mentor. When I sweep the front steps and set Grace's old lantern on the railing, I feel I am keeping faith with her memory. Each act, however small, is a declaration. I am still here, still useful. This chapter of my life has the texture of salt-worn wood, solid, scarred, bearing the weather of years. Yet I know how quickly solid things can fail. I have seen bridges collapse from neglect, beams snap because no one checked them in time. As I sit at the bay window with the light falling across Grace's empty chair, I sense that my own structure is under inspection. Whether my daughter sees me as foundation or burden, I cannot yet tell. But I know a storm is coming, and every storm tests what is built to last. If you're still watching and feel the sting of that first betrayal, comment number 1 below so I know you're with me. Now, let's uncover how everything truly began. My 68th birthday should have been a simple evening, nothing more than a quiet meal, perhaps a piece of blueberry pie at home. Instead, Amanda insisted on taking me out to a seafood restaurant on the wharf. I arrived early, wearing my best jacket, the one Grace had always pressed for me before church. I sat by the window, watching boats nudge against their moorings as the tide pulled them back and forth. When Amanda and Travis finally walked in, I could tell by the way they glanced at each other that the evening was more obligation than celebration. Amanda slid into her chair with her phone still in her hand, tapping replies even as the waiter brought menus. Travis launched into a long speech about some new token that, in his words, was going to revolutionize the financial world. I nodded politely, but the jargon washed over me like static. I asked about their drive from Boston, but Amanda barely looked up, murmuring that traffic had been awful. The gulf between us felt wider than the bay outside. When the plates arrived, I tried to steady my fork, but my hand betrayed me. The utensil slipped, clattering against the tile floor. I bent to pick it up, embarrassed, but before I could reach it, the waiter was already there. Amanda laughed, not kindly, but sharply, and said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear, "Dad is useless these days. Don't let him drive himself home." Her tone cut deeper than any accident of trembling hands. The word rang in my ears, the word I had dreaded hearing, spoken not in jest, but in judgment. The people at the next table turned their heads. Heat rose in my face. I forced a smile, pretended I had not heard the sting, but inside something cracked. All my years of building, repairing, providing, dismissed in a single cruel word. I chewed my fish in silence, tasting nothing. Travis filled the void with talk of investments. Amanda nodded absently, and I felt myself fading into the background of my own birthday. After dinner, as we stood in the cool night air, Amanda produced a neat folder of papers. "Dad," she said with a rehearsed sweetness, "these are just a few forms to simplify things. Utilities, medical authorizations. It will make life easier for everyone," Travis added. "Just minor powers of attorney. Nothing complicated." I reached for the folder, intending to read it, but Amanda placed her hand over mine. "No need, Dad. Just sign. We'll handle the rest." I withdrew my hand, shook my head gently, and said I would look it over later. Their smiles froze for a second before they recovered. At home, I could not sleep. I sat in the darkened parlor, the bay window framing the moonlit harbor. The house creaked softly, a sound I once found comforting, but that night it felt like a warning. I heard voices outside on the porch. Amanda's laughter floated first, then Travis's measured tone. "He's slipping," Amanda whispered, though the night carried her words straight to me. "Forgetting things, dropping things. We should file for emergency guardianship. The court will see the signs." Travis replied, steady and cold. "The house is worth at least $1.1 million in this market. We need it sold before winter. Guardianship will give us control, and once we adjust the will, I'll have legal standing too." My chest tightened. Each sentence felt like a nail driven into the beams of my home. Amanda, my only child, plotting to declare me incompetent. Travis, treating my life's work as numbers on a ledger. They spoke of me as if I were already gone. Amanda sighed. He's grateful just to hear from me. He'll never see it coming." The words froze me. My hand clenched the arm of the chair until the wood dug into my palm. I looked around at the walls Grace and I had painted, the floorboards I had laid, the photographs of our family. The house felt less like a refuge and more like evidence in a trial I had never agreed to attend. I remained in the shadows until their voices faded into the night. Then I climbed the stairs slowly, each step heavy with betrayal. In our bedroom, Grace's scarf still hung on the chair, faintly scented after all these years. I pressed it to my face and whispered, "They think I'm useless." My voice broke. But beneath the grief, something stirred, an echo of the man who had once calculated wind loads against steel trusses and built bridges to withstand tempests. If I could design structures to weather storms, I could design a plan to withstand this. I did not yet know what form that plan would take, but as I lay awake, staring at the ceiling beams I had sanded with my own hands, I promised myself one thing: they would not succeed in discarding me like an old tool. I was not useless, not yet. If you're still watching and sensing the storm ahead, drop a number 2 in the comments so I know you see it coming. Now let's move on to the first signs of real trouble. I woke the next morning with the weight of Amanda's words and Travis's schemes still pressing on my chest. The word useless had followed me into my dreams, echoing against the beams of the bridges I once built, ringing like steel under strain. But when I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the grain of the wood I had sanded myself, I knew grief alone would destroy me faster than age ever could. Engineers do not wait for structures to fail, they reinforce them before the storm. If my own daughter and her husband meant to strip away my life's work, then I would reinforce my future with every tool still at my disposal. The name that came to me was Nora Feldman. Years ago, when Grace was first diagnosed, she had urged me to meet with an estate lawyer. We wanted our affairs neat and clean so Amanda wouldn't carry any burdens. Nora had guided us through the process of setting up a small charitable fund for engineering students, and she had drafted our original wills. She was precise, practical, and kind in the way that comes from long experience with families in turmoil. If anyone could help me now, it was her. Her office sat on Exchange Street, above a bakery that smelled perpetually of warm bread. The building wasn't flashy: brick walls, tall, narrow windows, a plaque that simply read, "Feldman and Associates." Inside, the reception was modest but orderly. Mahogany desk, framed diplomas, shelves lined with binders. It felt less like a battleground and more like a workshop, and that gave me comfort. Nora rose from behind her desk as I entered. Her hair had gone more silver than I remembered, but her handshake was firm. "Martin," she said softly, "it's been too long." I was sorry to hear about Grace. "Thank you," I replied, settling into the chair across from her. For a moment, I almost faltered. To speak the betrayal aloud would make it more real. But she waited with patient eyes, pen poised above a legal pad, and I forced the words out. I told her everything: the birthday dinner, Amanda's laugh when she called me useless, the folder of simple papers, the late-night conversation I overheard about guardianship and selling my house. As I spoke, shame burned my cheeks, though none of it was my doing. Nora did not flinch. She simply made notes, nodding as though she had heard variations of this story many times before. When I finished, silence hung between us until she leaned back, tapping her pen gently. "Martin, let me be very clear. You are not helpless, and legally, you are not at their mercy." I felt myself exhale for the first time in days. "But they said." "They can say anything," she cut in gently. "Words are cheap. What matters is capacity. You are sitting here, recounting details, making decisions. You are competent. That means Amanda and Travis cannot force the sale of your house, cannot alter your will, cannot seize your accounts. Unless you sign something, they have no authority." Her certainty steadied me, like hearing the creak of a bridge under weight and knowing it still held firm. I asked, "Then what should I do?" She outlined the options with crisp efficiency. First, revoke the old will and draft a new one. This time, she recommended a no-contest clause. If Amanda challenged it, she would risk losing everything. Second, create a revocable living trust to hold the house and my accounts, shielding them from interference. Third, arrange for a medical evaluation by a neutral physician to certify my capacity. That way, if Amanda ever tried to claim I was incompetent, the evidence would speak louder than her accusations. Finally, she suggested writing a letter of intent, a personal statement to accompany the will, explaining my choices in my own words so that no lawyer could twist my motives later. I listened, the outline forming in my mind like blueprints. I had walked into her office carrying only shame and suspicion. I was leaving with a plan. And if I want to direct my estate somewhere else, I asked quietly. Her eyes softened. That is your right. Do you have someone in mind? I thought of Grace, of the night she stayed up grading papers for her tutoring job just to help Amanda through school. I thought of her dream that more young women should enter engineering, not be shut out by lack of support. Yes, I said firmly. I want to set up a fellowship in Grace's name for female students in technical fields here in Maine. Nora nodded, already writing. Then we'll make the Grace Cole Fellowship the cornerstone of the new trust. Amanda may still receive something, but only under conditions you define. I felt something inside me shift, as if the ground beneath my feet had steadied. It wasn't anger now, but resolve. They thought I was an old man fading into confusion, but I had clarity, sharper than I'd felt in years. I was an engineer again, drafting the load paths of my future. When the meeting ended, Nora handed me a checklist: medical appointment with Dr. Patel, bank appointments, draft documents ready within 48 hours. We'll move quickly, she promised. As I stepped out onto Exchange Street, the salty air hit me full in the face. For the first time since that awful dinner, my shoulders lifted. The betrayal still ached, but beneath it ran a stronger current, the knowledge that I was not powerless. I had a blueprint, and a man with a blueprint is never useless. If you're still watching and can feel the weight of that first shocking event, type number 3 below to show you're here. Now, let's see how the conflict grew even deeper. The morning after my meeting with Nora, I woke with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. The blueprint was laid out. Now came the labor. I called Dr. Neil Patel, the geriatric specialist Nora recommended, and scheduled an appointment for that very afternoon. If Amanda and Travis wanted to brand me incompetent, then I would arm myself with the clearest evidence possible. Dr. Patel's office sat in a renovated brick building near the university hospital. The waiting room smelled faintly of antiseptic and coffee, the kind of mix that spoke of long hours and tired patients. When my name was called, I walked in steady, determined to prove what I already knew. Dr. Patel greeted me with a warm handshake, then put me through his battery of tests, memory questions, recall tasks, balance checks, even a few problem-solving exercises. What year did you retire, Mr. Cole? Name 3 objects you see on this desk. I answered each calmly, and though my hands shook when I wrote, the answers came without hesitation. After nearly an hour, he leaned back, folded his notes, and smiled. You're sharper than most 50-year-olds I see. I'll prepare a full report, but let me assure you, you're entirely competent. His words felt like fresh beams anchoring an old bridge. The next step was financial. I walked into Harbor State Bank, where a young employee named Joanne Reed welcomed me into her cubicle. She was polite, efficient, but I noticed her glance at my gray hair with the same skepticism I'd seen in others. I explained I wanted a new account with maximum safeguards, alerts for every transaction, multi-factor authentication, and strict rules about third-party access. She walked me through the options, and when I signed the forms, I insisted she note in bold letters that no additional names were to be added without my explicit presence. Of course, Mr. Cole, she said, tapping her keyboard. You'll be the only one authorized. For the first time in weeks, I felt the numbers in my life were mine alone again. Back home, I turned to the house itself. I had the locks replaced with a smart system connected to my phone. The installer showed me how to track every entry, every failed attempt. I also added a camera above the front porch, hidden within the trim. If Amanda or Travis tried to slip in unannounced, the house would record their betrayal. It was the engineer's approach: measure twice, cut once, and document everything. Still, defense required more than hardware. That evening I sat at my desk, pulling out an old binder of family records. I created what Nora called a decoy, an envelope filled with photocopies of my outdated will, labeled and tucked in the top drawer of my desk where anyone snooping would find it. The true documents, signed and notarized, would remain locked away at her office. If Amanda or Travis came hunting, they would find the bait and perhaps reveal themselves in the process. The following day, Amanda called, her voice sugar-coated. "Dad, why don't we go to the bank together this week? We can streamline your accounts, make life easier." I told her I was busy refinishing a boat hull at the harbor and suggested we talk another time. Then I asked lightly, "Have you read those papers you asked me to sign?" Silence stretched on the line before she laughed it off. "Of course, Dad. Don't worry about it." But the way her voice faltered told me everything. That night, Connolly stopped by with a six-pack. He lowered his voice once we were in the kitchen. "Marty, you ought to know. Travis was at O'Malley's last night bragging about how easy it'd be to copy your signature. Said Amanda already had a photo of your license. And with a notary who doesn't ask too many questions, they could push papers through without you ever knowing." The words turned my stomach. I thanked Connolly, and once he left, I sat at the table gripping my glass of water like it was a lifeline. The next morning, I contacted a forensic document examiner in town, a woman named Karen, who specialized in handwriting analysis. I scheduled a session to create an official record of my signature, samples under controlled conditions, notarized, certified, and filed. If anyone tried to forge my hand, the discrepancies would be obvious in court. I also visited a notary to revoke any prior powers of attorney, stamping the papers with a fresh seal. By the time the sun dipped over the harbor, I felt as though I had been working on a bridge again, layer after layer of reinforcement, hidden from the eye but strong beneath the surface. Amanda and Travis saw me as an old man ready to be managed. What they did not realize was that I was already building defenses they would never breach. I locked up the house, checked the new deadbolt, and looked around the rooms filled with Grace's memory. This was only the beginning, I knew. These were the first supports of a greater structure, the kind that would stand against every storm my own family seemed intent on sending my way. I was no longer drifting in grief. I was working, and working for me meant survival. If you're still watching and realize how desperate the first attempts were, leave a number 4 in the comments to let me know. Now, let's find out how those efforts failed. Amanda called one Thursday morning, her tone brighter than the Portland sun spilling across my kitchen floor. "Dad, Travis and I are coming up this weekend. Thought we'd surprise you." The words were painted with cheer, but I heard the rustling of papers in the background and the edge of calculation beneath her voice. I told her she was welcome, then hung up and set about preparing, not the house, but myself. I turned on the cameras, checked the locks, and laid my documents in order. If this visit was meant to corner me, I would meet it head-on. Saturday evening, I cooked a simple dinner, clam chowder and fresh bread. Grace had always insisted the table be set with candles for guests, so I kept the tradition, though the soft light only heightened the sharpness in Amanda's smile. She kissed my cheek perfunctorily, Travis gave a tight handshake, and we sat. Conversation began harmless enough, traffic from Boston, weather along I-95. But soon, Travis leaned forward, spoon clinking against his bowl. "Martin, you've been alone a long time. We just worry about your health, your future. Don't you think it's time to simplify things?" Amanda chimed in sweetly, "Dad, it's not about control. It's about making sure everything is handled smoothly." Her words flowed like syrup, but I could feel the grit beneath. Halfway through the meal, Amanda pulled a folder from her bag, slid it across the table. Just a few updates, medical authorizations, insurance adjustments, nothing major. "If you sign, we'll be able to help you better." I pushed the folder back. "I had an evaluation with Dr. Patel last week. His report says I'm fully competent. I don't need anyone managing my life." My voice was steady, though my pulse drummed hard against my ribs. Amanda's face tightened. She gave a laugh meant to sound light, but laced with cruelty. "Dad, you couldn't even hold your fork without dropping it the other night. You're useless when it comes to this kind of paperwork." The word stung again, but this time I did not flinch. Instead, I reached into my jacket and laid Dr. Patel's signed report on the table. "Read this." It says otherwise. Travis scanned the first page, frowning, before Amanda snatched it back with a huff. I let the silence stretch, then reached into the desk beside the dining room and pulled out a manila envelope. "Since you're so interested in my affairs," I said calmly, "perhaps you'll find this useful." Inside was the decoy copy of my old will, placed exactly where I knew their eyes would light up. Amanda flipped through, and I watched the relief bloom on her face. She thought she held proof of her inheritance still intact. While they pored over it, I adjusted the angle of the small camera hidden on the mantel. Every word, every gesture was recorded. Travis's mask slipped first. He leaned back, voice rising. "We can finally move forward, Amanda. Once the house is listed, we'll have the capital we need." Amanda, emboldened, added, "That Boston condo is within reach now. 1.1 million, easily. This old place is just sitting here, rotting." Their words spilled out like water through a cracked dam, every sentence an admission. I sat still, like an engineer measuring stress on a beam, letting them reveal the depth of their intentions. Then, as if fate had timed it, Amanda's phone buzzed. She answered, cheerful at first, but her smile faded fast. "What? No, that's impossible." She turned pale, glancing at Travis. "They rejected the transfer, but the forms." I recognized the tone of the bank's fraud department. They had caught the forged authorization Travis had attempted with my old driver's license image. I had already revoked every prior power of attorney, and Joanne at Harbor State Bank promised to flag any suspicious requests. Amanda stammered, "No, my father approved. He must have forgotten." Her voice cracked. She hung up abruptly, hands shaking. I couldn't help the smile tugging at my mouth. "Trouble at the bank?" I asked, my tone mild. Travis slammed a fist against the table, rattling the bowls. "You think you're clever, old man? Do you realize what you're doing to us?" "Yes," I said evenly, protecting myself and Grace's memory. Amanda's eyes filled with angry tears. "We were only trying to help. You don't know what you're doing, but I did. I knew exactly." The camera caught her every word, every false claim of innocence, every slip of calculation. The storm had broken, and they didn't even realize the foundation beneath them was already crumbling. As they argued, I rose and cleared the dishes, just as I always had when Grace was alive. The motion steadied me. Behind me, their voices rose, accusing each other, blaming, panicking. They had come to corner me. Instead, they exposed themselves completely. That night, after they left in fury, I sat by the bay window. The lights of Portland flickered across the water, and I felt a strange calm. The battle had erupted, yes, but the bridge I was building to my own freedom held firm, and the storm had only just begun. That night, after Amanda and Travis stormed out, I sat in the bay window staring across the harbor. The tide rolled in and out as steadily as it had for centuries, indifferent to the chaos inside my home. My hands rested on my knees, and I asked myself questions I had avoided until now. Was I still a father first, meant to forgive even the deepest betrayal? Or was I a man who had given too much already and needed to protect what remained before it was stripped away? The word Amanda had hurled at me, useless, echoed louder than the gulls outside. I didn't sleep. I brewed coffee at dawn and drove to Nora Feldman's office, carrying the flash drive from my camera. She looked at me with quiet concern as I laid it on her desk. "It's all here," I told her. Them talking about selling the house, admitting what they planned. Nora plugged it into her computer and watched the footage in silence. When it ended, she folded her hands. "Martin, this is damning. You could walk into probate court tomorrow and protect every penny. But you need to decide. Do you want to hold this as leverage, keep the peace, or do you want to end the question forever with a new will and trust?" Her words settled on me like blueprints rolled across a table. Every option had weight. If I held back, Amanda might still claw for redemption. If I acted, I might burn the last fragile bridge between us. As we sat there, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Clara, an old friend of Grace's and Amanda's former teacher. "Martin, I thought you should know something. Amanda once confided she felt pressured by Travis. She cried, said she hated what she was becoming, but didn't know how to stop him. I read the words twice. A strange warmth flickered, hope maybe, that Amanda wasn't beyond reach. Perhaps Grace's daughter was still in there somewhere, buried under fear and manipulation. For a moment, I saw her not as the calculating woman at my table, but as the girl who once clung to my hand on the first day of school, begging me not to leave her. But memory can be cruel. I also heard her laughter in the restaurant when she called me useless, the sharpness in her tone when she insisted I sign away my authority. Clara's message was a thread of mercy, but I knew threads could snap under weight. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling of Nora's office as if it were the underbelly of a bridge I once inspected. Engineers know that compromise can be deadly. You cannot leave a rotten beam in place and expect the structure to hold, but sometimes you reinforce, test again, and leave a path for repair. Nora, I said finally, I want to change the will. The bulk of my estate should go into the Grace Cole Fellowship. Let it fund scholarships for young women in engineering. That was Grace's dream. Nora nodded, jotting notes. And Amanda? I hesitated. Grace's voice whispered in memory, don't give her so much that she forgets to be grateful. I swallowed. Amanda will inherit only if she meets a condition. She must leave Travis, establish herself independently, and prove it. If she challenges, she gets nothing. Add a no contest clause. Nora's eyes flicked up. That's firm, Martin. Are you sure? I'm sure, I said, though my heart weighed heavy. I won't abandon her completely. But I won't reward betrayal either. She slid a draft across the desk for me to review. The language was precise, cold as steel. My assets were redirected, the trust airtight. Amanda's path was there, narrow but real. If she wanted redemption, she would have to earn it with courage, not deception. I signed where Nora marked, my hand steady, despite the ache in my chest. The sound of the pen against paper felt like hammering rivets into a beam. Final, binding. Nora gathered the documents, promising certified copies by week's end. When I stepped back into the afternoon sun, the port smelled of salt and diesel. Fishing boats rocked against their ropes, creaking like tired but faithful workers. I walked slowly, feeling both lighter and lonelier. My choice was made. I had protected Grace's memory and my own dignity, but at the cost of severing what little remained between my daughter and me. I paused at the end of the pier, watching the waves slap against the pilings. Engineers build bridges, I thought, but sometimes, to keep what matters safe, you have to destroy one. The gulls screamed overhead, and for once, I didn't flinch. If you're still watching and sense the tension at its breaking point, write number 6 below so I know you're holding on. Now let's step into the hardest decision of all. The first calls came the morning after Nora finalized the new trust. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter while I stood by the window, pouring myself coffee. Amanda's name glowed on the screen. I let it ring until the sound faded. Moments later, Travis's number appeared, then Amanda's again. I turned the phone face down and listened to the harbor gulls outside. When I finally checked the voicemail, her voice cracked with anger and desperation. Dad, what did you do? The bank won't recognize the transfer. They said the forms were invalid. Did you cancel something? Call me back. This isn't funny. The second message was harsher, Travis's voice low and sharp. You're making a mistake. We'll go to court if we have to. Don't force our hand. By evening, another message arrived. Amanda again, this time pleading. Please, Dad. You know we only wanted to help. Don't let Travis lose everything. Don't let me lose everything. The words should have softened me, but I could hear the calculation still embedded in her tone. It wasn't love, it was panic. For years, I had longed for my daughter's voice to fill this house again, even if only through the phone. Now it echoed cold, every syllable weighed down by greed and fear. I sat in Grace's old chair, clutching the armrests, forcing myself to breathe evenly. A father wants to believe in redemption, but I had learned that belief without proof was just another form of surrender. News trickled back to me in bits and pieces. Connolly mentioned one night that he had overheard talk at the pub. Travis had been quietly fired from his firm. Rumor was, an old application he submitted had surfaced. Altered financial documents, doctored signatures. The firm had no choice but to sever ties. Without income, his confidence in Boston crumbled like wet plaster. Amanda's situation wasn't better. Her marketing job, already shaky, grew untenable as her performance faltered. Stress showed in her eyes, in her distracted demeanor at meetings, according to Clara, who still saw her occasionally in town. Their Boston lease was expiring, and with debts mounting, eviction loomed like storm clouds. Then came the storm in flesh. One evening, rain hammered the roof, and thunder rattled the windows. I heard pounding at the front door and opened it to find Amanda standing soaked through, mascara streaking down her face. She looked more like a lost child than the polished woman who once called me useless. "Dad," she gasped, pushing past me into the hallway. Water dripped onto the hardwood. "Tell me it isn't true. Tell me you didn't change everything." I closed the door behind her and leaned against it. "What do you mean, Amanda?" She spun, eyes wild. "The will. The trust. Travis says you've cut us out. Is that what you've done? After everything we've planned? After everything you promised?" Her words stung, though not in the way she intended. What I had promised was a childhood free of hunger, a college education paid in full, support when she faltered. I had never promised her my life's work as entitlement. "I don't owe you answers," I said quietly. "Not tonight." Tears rolled down her cheeks, mingling with the rainwater. She stepped closer, voice cracking. "Dad, please. You can't do this to me. I'm your daughter." I studied her face, searching for sincerity beneath the panic. But all I saw was fear of losing wealth, not fear of losing me. Silence stretched until she cursed under her breath and stormed back into the rain, slamming the door behind her. I stood there listening to the storm's roar, my chest aching with grief heavier than any bridge girder I'd ever lifted. No father dreams of watching his child unravel. Yet, I knew these were not punishments I had crafted. They were consequences Amanda and Travis had chosen through deceit and arrogance. Later that night, as I dried the floor where her shoes had left muddy prints, I whispered to Grace's photograph on the mantel. "This is the cost, isn't it? The price of teaching her what gratitude should have meant all along." Through the window, lightning split the sky, and for an instant the harbor glowed white. Amanda's figure was already gone down the street, swallowed by the rain. My heart tightened, but I did not chase her. Some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt until those who lit the fire understand the ruins they left behind. I sank into my chair, weary but resolute. The aftermath was painful, yes, but it was also proof. For the first time in years, I was steering my own course, not drifting on theirs. The storm outside would pass. The storm inside my family would take far longer. The house was quiet after Amanda's stormy visit. For 3 days, my phone sat silent on the counter. No calls, no threats, no desperate pleas. The silence should have been a relief, but instead it felt like an echo, an empty reminder of what used to be. I moved through the rooms, tidying, dusting, sorting papers, not because the place needed it, but because I did. Order gave me peace, a sense that I was reclaiming my life piece by piece. On the 4th morning, I sat in Nora Feldman's office again, the smell of coffee mingling with the salt air drifting in from the harbor. I slid a small flash drive across her desk. "The camera caught everything," I said. "Their voices, their admissions. Should I bring this to court now?" Nora tapped the drive thoughtfully before setting it aside. "Not yet, Martin. Evidence is powerful, but timing is everything. Right now, you are secure. Your assets are locked, your trust is filed, and your will is airtight. Unless they try to sue, you hold the stronger position by simply waiting." Her words settled in me like ballast in a ship, heavy but steadying. She was right. I didn't need to swing the hammer yet. Sometimes the strongest defense was patience. That night, the phone rang again, but this time it was Clara. She spoke gently, as if she knew the weight I carried. "Martin, I don't want to interfere, but I remember Amanda before all this. She sat by Grace's bed for hours when the chemo wore her down. She cooked soup, read aloud, even missed work just to be near her mother. She's lost now, yes, but don't forget, there was goodness once. Her words pierced me. After we hung up, I sat by the mantel staring at Grace's photograph. Memories rushed back unbidden. Amanda building sandcastles at Crescent Beach, running to me with scraped knees, crying when she failed her first college entrance exam, clutching me like I was her only anchor. Those fragments were real, not illusions. Somewhere beneath the layers of greed and Travis's influence, that girl still existed. Yet the sting of betrayal was just as real. I remembered Amanda's laugh when she called me useless, the way she pushed those papers across my table, as though I were already gone. The two visions clashed inside me, daughter and stranger, love and treachery. I knew I couldn't erase either. The next afternoon, I walked down by the waterfront. Portland Headlight stood on the rocky coast, its beams sweeping out over the gray Atlantic. I leaned against the railing, breathing in the salt spray. That lighthouse had stood for centuries, battered by storms, never wavering. Grace loved it. She used to say, "A lighthouse doesn't stop the storm, it shows the way through it." Staring at that tower, I understood. My job wasn't to punish Amanda into goodness or to erase her mistakes. My job was to stand firm, to protect what Grace and I had built, and to leave a light for others, even if Amanda never chose to follow it. When I returned home, I called Nora again. "I want to move ahead with the fellowship," I said. "Make it real. Not just words in a will, but an institution that breathes." 2 days later, I found myself at a cafe by the harbor, papers spread across the table. Outside, fishing boats bobbed in the water, gulls squabbling over scraps. Inside, I signed documents formally creating the Grace Cole Fellowship, a fund dedicated to supporting young women pursuing engineering. The ink dried quickly, but the weight of the act felt eternal. As I signed the last page, I felt a curious release. All the bitterness, all the sleepless nights, shifted into something new, purpose. Instead of letting betrayal define me, I was shaping it into a legacy Grace would have been proud of. Amanda's path was hers to choose, but mine was clear now. I closed the folder and glanced out the cafe window. Waves crashed against the breakwater, relentless but rhythmic. Beyond them, the lighthouse beam cut through the dusk, unwavering. Solutions aren't always about striking back, I murmured to myself. Sometimes they're about building something stronger, something that outlasts the storm. I sipped my coffee, warm and steady, and for the first time in months, I felt the horizon stretch wide open. If you're still watching and see how the search for resolution takes shape, comment number 8 below to tell me you're here. Now let's discover the path toward an ending. Word spread faster than I expected. A week after the fellowship documents were filed, Amanda must have caught wind of the new arrangements through someone at the courthouse or bank. The first I knew of it came through Nora. She called one morning as I was sanding a piece of wood in my workshop. "Martin," she said, her voice calm but edged. "Amanda and Travis contacted my office. They were furious. I reminded them of the no contest clause. If they challenge the trust, they walk away with nothing. That silenced them for now." I thanked her, though my stomach knotted. I had hoped Amanda would come to me directly, but instead she went first to threats. Later that afternoon, Connolly stopped by with a paper under his arm. He shook his head. "Travis has been telling anyone who will listen that you cheated him out of a fortune. But folks know better. Word is, he's skipped town, left Amanda behind to clean up the mess." It didn't surprise me. A man like Travis lived on borrowed time and borrowed money. Without me as his unwilling benefactor, he had nothing left to leverage. Still, the thought of Amanda alone, betrayed by the very man she defended, twisted something inside me. 2 evenings later, I heard the soft knock at my door. When I opened it, Amanda stood there, not in designer clothes or with carefully painted face, but in wrinkled jeans and tired eyes. She looked smaller somehow, as if the weight of her choices had pressed her down. "Dad," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I need to talk." "I see." I stepped aside and she entered. The living room, with its photographs of Grace, seemed to swallow her. She clutched her arms as if the walls themselves were heavy with judgment. "I know about the will," she said. "About the trust. Travis told me before he left. He said I'm finished, that you've cut me out." Her lips trembled. "Is it true?" I motioned for her to sit, but she remained standing, restless. "It's true that I made changes," I said evenly. "Your mother's memory deserved protection. My life's work deserved respect." She pressed her palms to her eyes. "I was wrong. I let him lead me. I called you useless because I thought if I hardened myself, I wouldn't feel guilty. But I do, every day. I don't know if I can fix it." Her words pierced me, but I kept still. Years of betrayal don't vanish with a confession. "Amanda," I said softly, "you still have choices. The trust leaves you a path, but only if you walk it alone. Leave Travis. Stand on your own, live honestly. Then, maybe, you'll see there is still something waiting for you." She looked at me with wide eyes, as if I had thrown her a rope while she was drowning, but fear and pride wrestled in her expression. She wanted the guarantee of rescue, not the work of swimming. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She whispered, "I don't know if I'm strong enough." I didn't answer. Some truths a person must find without help. After a long silence, she turned toward the door. At the threshold, she paused, half looking back, as though expecting me to call her name. I didn't. She stepped into the night and was gone. When the house was quiet again, I sat at the desk and opened my journal. My hand moved slowly but firmly across the page. This ending is not the one I wished for, but it is the one needed. Love is not permission for betrayal. Mercy is not blindness. Amanda may still change, but only she can decide that. I set the pen down and closed the book. Outside, the rain had stopped. Through the window, I could see the glow of Portland Head Light, steady against the dark horizon. Its beams swept across the water, indifferent to who watched, unwavering in its purpose. I realized then that was my role now. Not to carry Amanda on my shoulders, not to surrender what Grace and I had built, but to shine steadily for those who sought the right path. If Amanda chose to look toward the light, it would still be there. If she turned away, the fault was hers. I rose, shut off the lamps, and locked the door. My heart ached, but it was steady. Some bridges must collapse before their builders learn how to stand. The day of the fellowship announcement dawned bright and clear, a rare stretch of sun along the Maine coast. I buttoned my best suit, the navy one Grace bought for Amanda's graduation, and drove toward the university auditorium. The drive along the harbor was lined with fishing boats and gulls, the kind of scene Grace loved to sketch on quiet Sundays. I carried her memory with me like a steadying hand on my shoulder. The event was modest, just a handful of faculty, students, and a few parents, but to me it felt monumental. When the dean introduced me, I stepped to the podium with my notes, though I barely glanced at them. My voice carried across the room, older but steady. "We often believe our legacy lies in what we leave our children," I said. "But legacy is more than wealth or property. It is the light we kindle so that others may find a path we never had." I told them about Grace, her dream of supporting young women in engineering, how she believed that opportunity should never depend on birthright or fortune. Faces in the audience lit with recognition, some with tears. When I finished, a young woman in the front row wiped her eyes and clapped. Parents came up afterward to shake my hand. "You're giving them more than money," one said. "You're giving them hope." For a moment, I let myself feel proud, not the hollow pride of possessions, but the full kind that comes from honoring a promise. Still, as the crowd dispersed, my gaze kept drifting to the back of the room. Amanda wasn't there, of course. Yet part of me had hoped she might appear, even if only to sneer, because at least it would mean she still cared. Then, just as the crowd thinned, I caught a flicker of something familiar near the doorway. A woman, her hair pulled back, eyes shadowed, lingered in the hallway. Amanda. She didn't step forward. She didn't wave. She only stood watching, her face pale, her expression unreadable. For the briefest moment, our eyes met. There was no accusation there, only a glimmer of something, regret, maybe, or longing. Then she turned and vanished into the crowd. I stayed rooted where I was, my hands trembling slightly. I could have called out. I could have chased her, but I didn't. Some choices belong only to the one who must make them. Amanda had to decide for herself whether she would follow the light or remain in shadow. Later, at home, I sat at my desk and opened my journal. The words came slowly but firmly. Betrayal from one's own blood cuts deeper than any blade, yet it teaches where the boundaries must lie. Mercy is not blindness, forgiveness is not surrender. True legacy is not locked in a house or buried in a bank. It lives in the values we pass on, the doors we open for those who come after us. I closed the book and leaned back. Outside, the evening had settled over Portland. Through the window, I saw the beam of Portland headlight sweep across the water. Its light did not chase ships or drag them to safety. It simply shone, constant and unwavering, for those who chose to see it. I whispered softly, as though Grace were beside me. "You see, love?" I kept my promise. I protected what we built, and I lit the path you always dreamed of. I stepped out onto the porch. The air smelled of salt and pine. The lighthouse beam arced once more, casting its glow across my yard. In that moment, I realized revenge had never been about crushing Amanda or Travis. The sweetest revenge was living rightly, preserving dignity, and leaving a legacy no one could steal. I breathed deeply, shoulders loosening, and let the night settle around me. Whatever Amanda chose, the light would remain. In the end, life teaches us that betrayal, however painful, can become a turning point rather than a final wound. When trust is broken by those closest to us, the instinct is often to lash out, to prove strength through retaliation. Yet true power rarely lies in destruction. It lies in the quiet choice to protect dignity, preserve what is sacred, and transform suffering into something greater than oneself. We learn that family is not defined solely by blood or inheritance. It is defined by respect, gratitude, and the willingness to stand beside one another in truth. When those foundations crumble, it is not weakness to walk away. It is wisdom. Boundaries are not walls built out of bitterness. They are guardrails that protect what matters most. They remind us that generosity without limits can become self-betrayal, and that love must always be balanced by respect. There is also a lesson about legacy. Many spend their lives believing that possessions or wealth will secure their memory. But the real measure of a life is not in the houses built or the fortunes left behind. It is in the light one chooses to leave for others. That light may take the form of kindness, knowledge, opportunity, or simply the courage to live with integrity when others would exploit weakness. A true legacy cannot be stolen, for it is not written on paper or locked away in safes. It is carved into hearts, carried forward through values and actions that inspire long after we are gone. Perhaps the greatest revenge is not to see others suffer, but to rise above their cruelty without becoming cruel ourselves. The sweetest victory comes when dignity remains intact, and when bitterness gives way to purpose. To live well, to stay true to one's principles, and to leave behind something that uplifts rather than destroys. This is the kind of justice that endures. And so, even when storms rage and trust collapses, the choice remains. One can drown in resentment, or one can stand as steady as a lighthouse, shining for those who seek direction. The waves may crash, the winds may howl, but the light remains constant, an unshakable testament that life's worth is not measured by what was taken from us, but by what we chose to give. These turning points remind us that setting boundaries and valuing ourselves is not just an act of courage, it's the foundation of living with dignity. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What's one lesson from this story that you feel connected to, and how will you apply it in your own life? Let's grow together by sharing our thoughts. If this story resonated with you, drop a 1 in the comments. If not, feel free to leave a 0. Your feedback helps us improve. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that touch the heart and spark reflection. Thank you for watching, and here's to living life with strength, honesty, and authenticity.